Sphinx Radio, exploring the enigmas of the ages and the puzzles of the present, with your host, William H. Kennedy. The Great Depression, too, is now upon us. The mainstream media is referring to the Great Depression, too, as the economic meltdown, because they don't like the term Great Depression. In 2008, I received a little over 300 emails a day, primarily asking me about religious and paranormal matters, which is my field of expertise. In 2009, I've been receiving over 1,000 emails a day asking me about the current economic situation and what people can do to avoid the coming troubles. This stems from the fact that I've had survivalist type material on my webpage since 2004, many years before the economic meltdown hit. Why I saw a lot of this coming is that I was always a big fan of a man named Harry Browne, who has passed away recently, and Harry Browne was a certified financial analyst who wrote a book called The Economic Time Bomb, which came out in 1989, and he essentially predicted that the mortgage and savings and loan industry would eventually crash the entire economy. Harry Browne was a libertarian candidate for President of the United States in 1996 and in 2000, and he passed away just a few years ago. But having read Harry's stuff, I kind of saw a lot of this coming, more so than other writers and thinkers, and that's why I put that survivalist material on my webpage years ago. And if you go to williamhkennedy.com, I have an entire webpage devoted to survivalist thought. You can just click on it. There's movies and articles and all sorts of things about how to survive the economic meltdown. Now, what I would like to do in this episode of Sphinx Radio is to pull in some other thinkers who will assess the economic situation in a way that no one will be able to call me a conspiracy theorist or a paranoid survivalist, terms I've been referred to as before. And I'd also like to say that I'm very sorry that I'm right. I wish I was wrong, and I wish I were those other things, but recent events have proven me correct, and it's not a nice feeling at all to be proven correct in an economic meltdown. The first person we're going to listen to is a fellow named Dean LeBaron, who is a financier. He ran a company called Battery March for many years in Boston. You know, he handled billions of dollars in money. And he has a webpage, deanlebaron.com, and he gives weekly webcasts about financial things. He's been doing it since 1998. And here he is talking about the current economic situation. And this will really bring the point home that we're in a dire economic situation. This is from his February 17th broadcast, if you want to go to deanlebaron.com and hear the entire talk.
Economic team, Larry Summers and Jim Geithner, have looked into the abyss and seen the fires of hell, pulled back, singed, and scared. They are not as mute as they appear to be now. Instead, they know that they cannot tell the world we have no idea what to do. So we have to pursue, as I have said before, strategies that look precise when we know in fact that they are not. That is the American way. It's oriented around action rather than reflection. I only hope that there are some independent minds, some out-of-the-box thinkers on the side, quietly reflecting on conditions that could be changed. My personal preference is for widespread deep transparency. I want to know what the books are like of the banks, what the books are like for companies in any enterprise which gains government assistance. I believe should be a completely open book and let competitive pressures just completely go to the side so that we as a private market participants can correctly assess the risks we might be undertaking by investing in these enterprises, whether we do so with government participation or directly. We don't know any more now, 6 to 9 months into the exercise, than we did then.
So there you have Mr. Dean LeBaron essentially saying that the government, on the whole, really doesn't know what they're doing, and they're just trying something rather than nothing. But I think this whole stimulus package and all this stuff it's just going to be a big nightmare and a big failure. The only people who are enthusiastic about all these, infrastructure projects like roads and bridges are the organized crime groups that control the construction and cement companies. These are the same people who basically built the Central Artery project in Boston called the Big Dig for hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. So they're very happy about it. But anyone else with any common sense knows that this whole stimulus package is just going to be a big nightmare. It will employ people, but in the long run, it won't solve any of the systemic problems that we have in this Great Depression too. Now I'd like to bring on an interview with Mr. Ted Turner, the founder of CNN, a very optimistic man, as is Mr. Dean LeBaron. These are the optimists speaking, the capitalists, the futurists who are saying these sorts of things. And this is an interview that Ted Turner did with Charlie Rose just a few weeks ago, and I'll let him speak for himself about the future of the United States and the world.
Not doing it will be catastrophic. We'll have 8 degrees, we'll be 8 degrees hotter in 30 or 40 years, and basically none of the crops will grow. Most of the people will have died, and the rest of us will be cannibals. Civilization will have broken down. What the few people who are left will be living in a failed state like Somalia or Sudan, and living conditions will be intolerable. The droughts will be so bad there'll be no more corn growing. Not doing it is suicide. Just like dropping bombs on each other, nuclear weapons is suicide. So we've got to stop doing the two suicidal things, which are hanging on to our nuclear weapons,
and global,
and then after that we've got to stabilize the population. When I was born, there
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
with too many people. That's why we have global warming. We have global warming because too many people are using too much stuff. But if there were less people, they'd be using less stuff.
So Ted Turner, the optimist, sees widespread death and ultimately cannibalism for the human race. And the things he's talking about, like doing away with nuclear weapons and global warming, there's nothing being done to stop these things. As far as population control goes, that sounds just as draconian as the world he's talking about. How do you stop people from breeding? China has over 1 billion people, and they have a one-child per family rule, but you'd need about 20 billion people to enforce the one-child per family rule. So I guess the only other way to decrease the population is quite simply to starve people to death in the Malthusian fashion. Now, I'm not for that. I'm just predicting that's what's going to happen one way or another. There's a thing on the internet you should look at. It's called the world clock. Go to Google and just type in world clock, and this will give you all the deaths per day in the world from different things. Now, over 300,000 people a day now die of what they call malnutrition, which is another name for starvation. So we are kind of already on our way to culling the population through mass starvation. It's already happening. 300,000 people a day is quite a bit of people, if especially if you're in that group and see people around you starving to death. And eventually that number will double and triple and quadruple and so on till you see hundreds of millions and eventually billions of people will perish. Mr. Turner was correct about a lot of what he was saying in that statement he made on Charlie Rose. Now, just looking at those two statements from Dean LeBaron and Ted Turner, we can conclude that the world is catapulting into a complete nightmare, and that the survivalists like Kurt Saxon and Don Stevens and people in that genre of writing were absolutely correct. And what we need to do as individuals and families, it's a little bit of what I said earlier, we'll have to form small groups and try and take care of each other in very drastic times. You really can't count on the government or the police because they'll be just too busy with too many people. And there are all these violent gangs that are out there that the police won't be able to control eventually. For example, in Juarez, Mexico, just the other day, the police commissioner of this city in Mexico right across the border was forced to resign because a Mexican drug cartel started murdering policemen every 48 hours, and they demanded that this man resign or they'd continue doing it, and they did, and he quit. So Juarez, Mexico has caved in to organized crime, and this will eventually spread across the border into the United States. It already is to a certain degree in the border towns in Texas. There are home invasions and kidnappings and threats, and all that will move further north. So I'm just pointing out, don't count on your local police department to protect you from the coming savagery. You want to organize yourself in small groups of people for mutual aid and mutual defense. You'll have to do this or you will perish. That's the way it is. Now, until that time, there are many things you can do. As I said earlier, go to williamhkennedy.com to the Survivalist Multimedia page, and there's lots of great information there. And what you will find is really solid information. I have, a section on Introduction to Preparedness, what is a survivalist, Red Cross Disaster Supply Kit List, where you can buy personal survival kits. You can learn how to survive in extreme conditions. There's some films from the History Channel, a documentary called Oil Apocalypse about how things might fall apart soon. There's a mega tsunami film which will show what the United States would be like if New York were hit by a major flood. I have introduction to the major survivalist thinkers like Kurt Saxon, Yule Gibbons, if you remember him from the Grape Nuts ads, Don Stevens, Abby Hoffman, Steve Gaskin. I have a section on debt management. Everyone is now in debt, whether you want to be or not. There's links there to Debtors Anonymous for people who are having trouble with debt. There is a link to the Consumer Credit Counseling Service. There is a section, a film on how to budget your money. There's a documentary by Danny Schechter called In Debt We Trust, how we've all been catapulted into debt against our will. You can get your FICO score at freecreditreport.com. There is a link to a page which tells you how to get collection agents off your back from calling you. You have rights there. You don't have to be harassed by these groups. I have a section on the permaculture movement, which seeks to have people live in small agrarian communities and support each other. I have the no work movement section. Work is for losers, and in there's a lot of great information. There's a section on free food from Uncle Sucker, which is public programs like food stamps if you need them. Look, don't be ashamed to go on these things. You need food, shelter, and clothing and medical care. And there are many legal means by which to get them. Stick to the legal means. But if you need to go on food stamps or there's information on my page on food pantries. There's a section on where you can get free vegetarian food if you live in an urban area. There's an article, Why Work? The Anti-Wage Slave Manifesto. There is an online book for free, The Guide to Cottage Industries for Older Adults. There's a book, A Complete Guide to a Successful Internet Business. Over 1 million people make their living off eBay, and you could become one of them. There's a video series, How to Start a Successful Internet Business. There's a section, How to Fire Your Boss, the IWW Guide to Workplace Agitation if you want to annoy your employer. There's a book, Possum Living, How to Live Well Without a Job. And there's all sorts of other great information on how to sell on eBay, all sorts of things there. I have a hand-to-hand combat section about how to defend yourself with your hands. I have a firearm instructions video, how to use weapons if necessary. I have legal issues, how to act if questioned by law enforcement. There's a film there, a law professor explains your right to remain silent. You can watch a film of a policeman explaining why you shouldn't talk to the cops at all. There's a film by the ACLU called The Citizen's Guide to Surviving Police Encounters. And basically, if the police stop and talk to you, just say you have nothing to say unless you have legal counsel present. Whatever they say, they won't even read you your rights. They'll say things like, could I ask you a few simple questions? And just say, I have nothing to say without legal counsel present. Don't consent to any search of your vehicle or home because the police are notorious for planting evidence. So you get all this stuff on the Survivalist webpage at williamhkennedy.com. I have a section on homeschooling if you want to educate your kids without going to these horrible public schools that are drug-ridden. I've been a big proponent of the homeschooling movement because I was a substitute teacher on the grammar, middle school, and high school level, and I was a philosophy instructor at a university, and believe it or not, that's why I'm for self-education and homeschooling. The institutions which are supposed to educate us, in reality, really brainwash us and dumb us down. So you can get all this solid, really great information on williamhkennedy.com. Go to the Survivalist Multimedia page. It's right in the left-hand column on the links. And this will give you some really solid information. If nothing else, go to the debt management section because that's a big thing I get emails about. People are in debt or their mortgages have tripled. They're hounded by credit card collection agencies, and this will give you some solid legal footage. For example, debt collectors cannot call your home if you send them a letter saying you only want to be contacted by mail, and if they keep calling you, they can be fined by the Federal Trade Commission up to $1,000 per day per call. So you can actually turn the tables on these parasites and get some money out of them. That is my big thing, my way to help people during the Great Depression too, is this Survivalist webpage. And it's very extensive, and you really have to educate yourself and others. KurtSaxon.com has a lot of great information too. You can go there and buy his DVDs and stuff on basic survivalism. But there again, I hope this answers a lot of the questions for the over 1,000 emails I've been getting a day concerning the Great Depression too. The materials on williamhkennedy.com. The Survivalist Multimedia page is free for the most part. Some things you have to buy, but the vast majority of it will cost you nothing. All of this will help you survive or the economic meltdown, or whatever you want to call it, whatever the media decides to call it next week. It equates to the same thing. But there is a message of hope, and people, even in small groups, can organize themselves and survive and form great economies. One thing the system does is it alienates people and makes them feel powerless to these greater things. It makes them feel bad. Well, don't. It's terrible, some of the things they do. For example, a Bank of America, people who died in debt, who owed the money, their families would call Bank of America and just to report that the person is dead, and they would try and make the relatives of the dead person pay off the debt. Well, dead people owe no debts. But the Bank of America would say, like the sons and daughters of deceased people, well, it's because of people like your mother that this country is in this problem. There was a big news story about it. Don't take any crap from the system, okay, when it comes to things like that. If you're being harassed by debt collectors, which, as I said, is the number one thing I get emails about, get the address of the place, send them a registered letter, tell them you only want to be contacted by mail, and threaten to turn them into the Federal Trade Commission in your state attorney general's office. If they keep on your back, there again, there's more information, WilliamHKennedy.com, Survivalist Multimedia page. I hope things get better for everybody, and I hope this information session has been good for you, and I hope to hear some positive stories in the emails I get in the future. This is William H. Kennedy for Sphinx Radio, telling you to survive the Great Depression too. Thank you.